Amy, what would you say? Now, you're in a very special. You're in rarefied air. I know that, and you certainly belong there. You've earned every bit of it. I know all the stories from Larry from so many years about you. And but so you've got this special place, and you're working with some of the biggest leaders in the world, literally, and advising them. What would you say the role of money is when you're talking about employees? Let's say, what's the role of money in terms of their motivation versus motivation for other things like purpose or anything besides money? What role does money play versus those other things?
It's this is an ongoing question, both in research and in practice, right? So it's probably a question we'll never fully answer in precise terms, and it'll always be a bit contextually embedded. But I will go back to something Larry used to say almost as a quip all the time, and I loved it. He said, if all you have to offer is money, you had better have a lot of it, right? I'm sure you heard him say that. Right?
Yeah. What a great way to say that.
What a brilliant statement that is, right? Because it's money. I mean, money is obviously necessary for life, for housing, for everything, for schooling, but it's not truly meaningful in the sense of heart and soul. Why am I here? Those little voices that are occasionally reminding to answer the questions, who am I and why am I here, right? And meaning in this life, on this earth at this time. And it cannot be, the cliches nobody ever said on their deathbed, I wish I'd made more money, right? Wow. Especially wealthy people never said that, right? So they might say, I wish I'd spent more time with my family, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the state of the art on this is people need, in the kind of cumulative research, people need to feel they are being paid a fair amount, right, for the work they do. Now, I'll come back to that in a moment. So fair amount, right? And above that, it turns into more about ego and keeping score. Like the reason why, every day these days we read that billionaires are still raking in more billions. As we all know, it doesn't change their lifestyle. It cannot, right? There's just literally no way to spend that kind of money. And so you ask why are people motivated to do that? And it's clear, it's a scorecard, right? It's a scorecard, and we're competitive people. We want to. So what you need to do, I think, in a business, because you don't want to be spending money unnecessarily. In a business, you need to find other scorecards that are just as exciting to people after the fair wage, right? And that's the opportunity to make a difference in customers' lives, the opportunity to be a part of a winning team, the opportunity to come into a workspace each day that is pleasant and energizing. There's all sorts of it's Maslow's hierarchy. There's all sorts of things that we have and want in our lives to feel good about ourselves, and a big part is making a contribution.
What do you think about? I learned this a long time ago that it feels like the more I learn and I learn about leadership specifically, the more I have to learn, the more there's this unquenching desire to get better, to learn, to perform better, to lead better. How's your experience been with that?
I think that's right. I sometimes feel that I'm learning in circles, though. Even this conversation is one where I so often have to refer back, to lessons I learned 30 years ago. So, yes, there's always more to learn. I think, in a way, it's not conceptual learning; it's practical learning. Right? Where there's really more to learn is how to become more self-aware, better at self-management, better at aligning our aspirations for our values and our actual actions. I think that's something that we will, as human beings, we keep learning how to do that, and hopefully we get better and better at it over time. But it's hard, right? It's really hard, and I'm not sure there's any brand new ideas under the sun with respect to leadership.
You know, Amy, I know you know the famous story with Larry Wilson and Dr. Abraham Maslow, of course, and the whole story about him going to Brandeis University and the kind of mentoring Larry over a period of time. Where have we come in terms of understanding the motivation of the people we're leading since Maslow's hierarchy? Is it evolved, or is it the same, or what's your take on that?
You know, I mean, I think it's evolved primarily in the sense of the word is out, right? I mean, I think most professionals are aware of Maslow's hierarchy. Now, researchers will chip away at at details, but the essence of the insight that there are hygiene needs. You know, if you are hungry and don't have a roof over your head, that is all consuming, right? It is very hard to be creative and full of passion about some higher purpose if you're hungry, and that's something that is incontrovertible, really. But what's fascinating about And then there's kind of belonging and being a part of a community and so forth, and then up to a real sense of a calling and a higher purpose. And I think that what's mostly changed over that period of time, when Larry was meeting with Maslow, he probably wasn't a household name, but Larry read this book and went, "Wow, this is really interesting." And as you say, the story sort of hopped on a train and went all the way
on the phone.
Showed up in Boston.
On the telephone. He picked up the phone. Right?
Yeah, called him on the phone, and that's and I remember one thing Larry would say with that story was, "My God, he treated me as if I had a perfect right to be there," which I always found that a really moving and touching line, and I sometimes have to catch myself, right? Because do you make sure, do I make sure to treat people as if they had a perfect right to be there? Because they do, right? Now, time is the one finite concept, right? I mean, you can't make more than 24 hours in your day and so on. So we do have to be, we unfortunately we all have to make tough decisions about what we do and what we don't do. But I thought that was a very powerful and wise thing to hear and for him to have noticed.
Wow.
That's a great story.
Well, hey, as we get to wrapping this up, I know one thing people are going to want me to ask you for sure is if you had to reduce everything you've read, all the different books and all the different things, and you had to give me advice, what would be the book or two that you would say I should go get first that would be the best for me to become a better leader?
Let's see. I think I'm going to start with Humble Inquiry by Ed Schein.
Okay.
And Ed is 93, I think now, and emeritus professor from MIT, and really considered the founding father of culture, right? That he's kind of the first person to say companies have cultures. But Humble Inquiry, which is a relatively recent book for him, the title in a way says it all, although it's full of detail and thoughtfulness. But inquiry, it's Peter Drucker even said good managers aren't the ones with the answers, they're the ones with the questions, right? With the good questions, not the right answers. And yet you can't really ask the right questions if you're not approaching reality and approaching your people from a perspective of humility. Why humility? Because you don't know everything. Full stop. You just can't. Nobody does, right? So, and yet if you act like you know everything, you're not going to hear anything, and no one's going to want to follow you anyway, right? So maybe for a while, right? But so Humble Inquiry is really, to me, it's a stance, right? It's a stance that says, I don't know. I am really eager to learn from you, and sort of here's where we're heading. Another book that I'm a huge fan of is called Leadership and Self-Deception. I don't know if either of you have read it.
I read it years ago. It's a very good book.
It's a beautiful book, and it's written as a novel, which I'm not going to say it's Pulitzer Prize winning fiction, but I guess Pulitzer Prize is news, but Booker Prize, let's say, fiction. But it's profound, right? It's profound psychological truths about interpersonal interactions. I think that's if you read leadership and self-deception, you will realize, you sort of understand how we all deceive ourselves first all the time. In terms of, the fundamental deception is I'm right and you're wrong, right? And it's not true, but it's sort of how we see reality in a way. So we have to, if we're wise and if we grow and learn, we realize I'm partially right and I'm missing something. And same with you, right? So there's a kind of coming from a place of humility and interest in the world and in others. Really profound stuff, I think, for any leaders. And I guess I'd be remiss, and I say this almost partly playfully, but I do hope your listeners will want to read The Fearless Organization, which is my book on why psychological safety is so very important today and how to go about creating more of it in your organization.
Do you have a copy there, Amy, you could hold up or no?
That's so silly. I should, but I
always
don't.
forget to do that too, yeah.
I know. I mean, I could,
Well, you're a great leader, not a great marketer.
Exactly. No, I'm in operations and R&D. I don't do marketing.
No, you've got 6 other. That's your latest book, because you've got 6 other books.
That's my latest book. Yeah, I've got 6 others, but that's probably the most important. And then teaming. Teaming,
and that's about team building.
Yeah, it's about team building in a fluid world, right? In a world where more often than not you're building teams on the fly, right? Wow. I'm teaming with you today, and I'm teaming with you tomorrow. So
right. Amy, if you had one thing to just throw out there as a sort of a last, here's my one piece of advice. You're such an esteemed person in leadership in the world. Just for all these people trying to build these teams, what would be the one piece of advice? I know it's a tough question, but that you would offer them if you could only give them one about how to be a great leader?
Get centered in what you really care about first, right? What really matters, and then get curious. So centered, then curious.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you say a little more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So centered is that push to what really matters, to move the unhealthy ego off center stage for a moment. Be present with others. That frees you up to be oriented toward others and toward goals, right? The very exciting goals you put on your plate for this year or this life. And then get curious is just keep reminding yourself you don't see reality. You see a version of reality that is filtered through your own experiences. With that recognition of your limitations, then you're curious to learn more about others. So then you're one of those people who is out there asking others what they see, what they care about. And then you're essentially a good listener and people flock to you and then they follow you.
So last question, Amy. I know you're busy. You've got Zoom calls in China and all over the world. I taught your assistant. What's next for Amy Edmondson? Because I've been following you for so many years, but what's next on your path? You've done everything you can do, I think, but what's next?
What I haven't done, I've written, as you said, 6 books, but I haven't written one that it was deliberately for a broader audience, right? As opposed to coaches and managers and consultants. So I'm doing that. I'm working on that now, called The Right Kind of Wrong, The Science of Failing Well. So I'm really trying to paint the failure landscape. What's the good kind of failure? What's the not good kind of failure? How do you know the difference? And how do you navigate this terrain as effectively as possible?
That's great. Well, I'll look forward to that.
That's incredible. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your insight and your time. We really appreciate it.
Can I say one thing before we break?
Sure.
Amy, I just want to let you know that, you've heard all this stuff before, but from 1998 to 2013 till, almost the day Larry died, not the day quite, but pretty close. I spent a lot of time with Larry. I know you spent more time with him before that time, but he just loved every company we went to. He quoted you, I think, every time I was in a speech with him, which was obviously hundreds of times. Dr. Amy Edmondson, he would tell stories about, he was so proud of everything you've done. And I no doubt you're his most successful student. So I just want to let you know that he bragged about you all the time. He just loved you so much. And, so I appreciate you coming on the show as a favor to me. So
that's so kind. That makes my day. And I adored him. And honestly, everything I know, I pretty much learned from Larry. A version of everything I need to know, I learned in kindergarten. Larry was a brilliant and generous and ingenious thinker.
Sure was. Well, Amy, thanks again. So we know how busy you are. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We
Thanks,
really
Amy.
appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Take care.